Anthony Fauci on his response to COVID and on the changing stories that we've had over these many years in the aftermath of COVID-19 that ruined, destroyed so many lives needlessly. We can continue to talk about that. I'm trying to keep a calm demeanor today. I'm trying to remain a joyful warrior today. So it's difficult for me to talk about Anthony Fauci because, frankly, Anthony Fauci deserves to be in jail. I believe the manner in which the NIH and the CDC responded to COVID-19 resulted in people losing their lives. I believe that because of the way that we reacted upon learning that it was a bat meat problem from way over there in Wuhan, China. That's what we were told. Wuhan, China, bat meat problem, watch yourselves. And then as Donald Trump took the thing seriously and decided to shut flight from China down, the Democrats, they howled and protested that Donald Trump was being xenophobic. He was being xenophobic in directing us to the origins of the virus itself. And the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, and the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, they remained as silent in their defense of Donald Trump. They should have come out and defended him for stopping those flights. They did not. Secondarily, and more nefariously, they were way too busy not worried about the American public, not worried about what might happen to us over the intentional or unintentional release of this virus from a lab in Wuhan, a virus lab that we ultimately were funding. Oh, yes, we were funding that lab. Gain of function research was absolutely funding that lab. The connective tissue is clear. Was it a direct line of funding? Did we go from point A, the budget of the United States of America, to point B, China? No. Of course they didn't do that because they wanted to hide it. It was all the result of eliminating gain-of-function research in the United States of America and looking to other places around the world in order to continue funding said gain-of-function research. And by the way, gain-of-function research in and of itself is not an evil thing, but it is a very important thing that we do it the right way so as not to allow leaks to happen, or we don't give it to the wrong people so that they might intentionally leak whatever they're working on. Which way this happened, I don't know. I don't pretend to know the answer to that question. There's some that do. Oh, well, it was intentionally leaked or it was unintentionally leaked. But I think it is beyond a time that we accepted the fact that it came from a Wuhan lab. I mean, come on. Give me a break. And in the meantime, Anthony Fauci remains out of jail. He should be in jail. Why? Not only did he lie to the President of the United States of America, not only did he lie in a de facto way to the American people directly and indirectly, but he did so to save his own skin. And he lied before Congress after promising to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help him God. Here's my extrapolation of what I believe went down during that period of time. I was in Birmingham at the time. All of you guys are up here. Many of you. But anywhere across the United States of America, we all heard the same thing. This is an isolated situation in the country of China. It came from we believe, they always say, oh, we believe, it came from a bat meat market. It was the result of the eating of bat meat. There's nothing to worry about. We're gonna monitor the situation. We have to be careful not to allow this thing to get over here because it's already in human beings now, and it can be. So the idea was that this came from a cultural experience based in China, and that so long as we monitor the movement from China to America or China to other parts of the world, we should be just fine. The predication of the explanation is what I have such an issue with, because I believe that it set off a series of events by which the American public reacted very differently than we would have reacted had we been told the truth. Point is this. If Anthony Fauci, instead of being worried about covering his butt at the National Institutes of Health and covering his butt at the Centers for Disease Control, because they didn't want it to get out that the American government was partially involved in that virus lab and in the leak of the virus itself, because they were more worried about saving their own skins than they were about telling the truth to the American people, They predicated the conversation by insisting that our best evidence demonstrates to us. This is what they told us at the time. I remember it like it was yellow. I mean, I'm elephantine about these things. That our best evidence indicates that it came from a wet market in Wuhan, China. And at the time, they refused to tell us that there was a virology lab there. Y'all remember this? At first it was in Wuhan. This is a town in China. And, there's a wet meat market there. And we believe, they sell these exotic items, and they sold the bat meat and Anthony found and the bat meat, and then it's our best evidence is that the bat meat came from the bat meat, and so as a no fear, just don't eat bat science. Don't eat bat meat. You'll be fine. When he said that, he knew that there was a virology lab there. They refused to admit it at the time. Did not tell the American public. They knew that there was research going on with coronavirus at that Wuhan virology lab. Anthony Fauci knew that our government was assisting in the funding of that laboratory through various points of entry in the United States of America. You give money to research laboratories in the United States of America, and they in turn can give monies to other research facilities, and they eventually get that money to Wuhan. And they knew it. Why didn't they tell us? Why weren't they honest with us? Why, when this information came out in February of 2020 and in March of 2020, were we not told the truth? Why were we not told that all you have to do is tell the truth that we believe gain-of-function research is essential to helping the survival of the human race. We believe that we must identify the possibilities of viruses to our knowledge, mutating in certain ways that would make them more dangerous, would arm them in a sense to combat against our best vaccination efforts. And therefore, we in very controlled environments choose to attempt to weaponize certain viruses to try to replicate how they may mutate in the real world so as to figure out how to best combat them should it ever happen. That's a perfectly acceptable explanation. What's not acceptable is handing that off to the Red Chinese to allow them to do it, because we cannot control the environment in which these experiments are done. And secondarily, we cannot control the motivations of the communist Chinese and what their true aims and goals are when we have no authority or ability to witness what they're doing. We handed that over during the Obama administration. There was a time to justify gain-of-function research, and we didn't do it. And there's a debate as to whether or not it's justifiable at all. That's not what I'm talking about. What's not justifiable is lying to the American people when Anthony Fauci very well knew there was a virology lab in Wuhan, never mentioned it. He very well knew what was going on inside of that lab, never mentioned it. He very well knew that the strong possibility existed at that moment in February of 2020 where this virus came from, and it was a possibility that the Chinese released it intentionally. And he never once mentioned it. And then before you know it, before we ever got to the truth about any of it, before we could even raise our hands to ask the question, we began a process by which the federal government of the United States of America decided to issue all of these edicts and rules and conducts of behavior that had nothing to do with viral control. It had nothing to do with science. Blanket edicts that did irreparable harm to the United States of America, to the point that businesses that had been a part of the American fabric went out of business. People who had put their hearts and their souls and their personal treasure, their life fortune into business opportunities and business ventures, watched those businesses vanish in real time because of edicts laid out by state governments having been pressured to do so by organizations like the National Institutes of Health and the CDC. Thankfully, we had a president that refused to issue any sort of national blankets or national mandates, despite the fact that he was urged to do so by the very likes of Anthony Fauci. Sadly, our president of the United States simultaneously felt like he could at least trust that Anthony Fauci was following the science when we talked about mask mandating and 6 feet of distance, none of which made any sense ever. And to this moment don't make any sense or any difference. I remember talking about it in late March of 2020, how sadly all of this works with regard to trying to protect those that are most vulnerable in our society, those that have pre-existing conditions, those that are elderly, much like a typical flu situation, but it is a very dramatic flu situation. We have to protect those who cannot protect themselves, and we have to absorb the nature of the virus into the fabric of our communities through herd immunity, allowing the strongest of these to become naturally immunized from the virus itself to the point that we reach that said herd immunity. We didn't do that. We refused to do it. Anthony Fauci refused to do it, lying to the American people all the way. Instead, they chose to take the tactic of human behavioral control. And in doing so, they began a series of events, I believe, ultimately designed to see how far we would allow them to go. You've got to wear a mask. You've got to stay 6 feet apart from one another. You have to shut down your businesses. You have to stay at home for the rest of eternity. You'll do it, and you'll do it because we said it's best for you. No, you're not allowed to go to that beach. No, you're not allowed to surf on that surfboard.
You have to watch your family die through a window.
You're not allowed to be with your family members. That was you and I think a lot alike since we've gotten together 2.5 years ago, Bell, because it's exactly where I was leading to. You're not allowed to hold your grandmother's hand when she dies. No, you're not allowed because we say so. I am not suggesting that I understand the intricacies and the ins and outs of all of the science on this. But I promise you, I understand when the interest moves away from science and moves towards psychological behavioral control. And that's what happened. And I believe that there is an effort to continue that level of behavioral control through politics. I think they're interconnected. I don't think it's about this election is less about Donald Trump in my mind and more about Anthony Fauci. "18 minutes after the hour, David's in Goodlettsville. David, thank you. You're first up today. How are you, sir?
I'm doing very good. How about you?
I'm well.
Awesome. Yeah, me too. I love the show. I just wanted to say there was a quote from Anthony Fauci on the 11th of January, 2017, where he says, "There is no doubt that Donald Trump will face a surprise outbreak during his presidency." So how would he have known that unless he was single-handedly running the Wuhan lab? And, a lot of people say this could be a conspiracy theory, but biological warfare was something always predicted, even by Nixon and Reagan and the Democratic presidents prior to them after World War II. And then China would be at the helm to make something like that a reality. So that's my 2 cents on Fauci.
Well, no, David, we had a little bit of a phone break up there, but I think I've got the spirit of what you're saying. You're right. I mean, Anthony Fauci said a lot of things about a lot of things over the years. Sadly, he has been known in public. And was he the most well-paid public government official, federal government official in the United States of America? He's been around. I mean, he absolutely botched the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s and sadly was rewarded for doing so. So he's well on record about any number of things. I understand what you're saying about some of the commentary, and I've said same. They explain it away. I'm not saying I agree it. They explain it away by saying, well, he was just predicting that there would be another outbreak in the future. There always is. I mean, if you look at bird flu and swine flu and this thing and that thing and this coronavirus and that coronavirus, there's always something that comes up. SARS-1, SARS-2, yeah. They would suggest, and once again, I'm not saying I agree with it. I don't know what I believe in that regard. That he was speaking generally and broadly, not specifically about a certain thing to happen. Sadly, because he has absolutely positively, I'll say this, David, this is where we agree. I don't know that I'd go that far, but I'll say this. He's absolutely positively destroyed any credibility he would ever have with me or anyone else that's been monitoring this situation based on the number of times that he lied in 2020 to the American people who were struggling and searching for answers and truth. I don't begrudge, and a lot of people want to go back and point fingers. I don't begrudge people for being confused. I said at the time in April of 2020 and May of 2020, it's okay to be confused. It's okay to be unsure. We haven't gone through something like this. We need to figure it out, and we need to find people that understand the nuance of what's going on, that are willing to tell us the truth. Sadly, what I didn't know at the time is that we were already being lied to by those same people that we would look to for truth. And anyone that tried to break through it, anyone that tried to deliver a different opinion about whatever set of circumstances we were looking at, anyone that wanted to suggest that we go a different way in terms of how we handle this, I remember that I was shut down. In part, discussing herd immunity and the ability of the American people and the people of the world truly to get beyond this by subdividing categories of people, by making sure that we protect those that cannot withstand the virus itself, by finding those that can and allowing them to be infected with it, because it's going to happen one way or the other, so that they can create immunity amongst the population of the world and eventually extend said immunity beyond their circles, and to tamp the virus itself down while protecting those who can't protect themselves. Sadly, that didn't happen that way. And it lingered. And it festered. And the level of mistrust that we have in basic institutions, there was a time where I understood that while it was a government installation, that you could kind of basically believe in certain statistical analysis and data from the Centers for Disease Control. I don't know that you can believe anything anymore, considering that Anthony Fauci is currently on Capitol Hill being accused of their organization intentionally misspelled words in email communication so that an email communication could not be flagged at a future date on a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act request. You understand the level of nefarious behavior that has to be going on for me to tell Bell, when you and I communicate, I mean, this is what we're talking about. Bell, Kay, and I want to talk bad about our boss, Dan Mandis. Bell, we have to misspell Mandis in each email communication that we offer over our internet system, because we don't want Dan to have the ability to look up his name at a later time and see some of these email communications. Before we talk about Dan, we've got to misspell his name to make sure that nobody can see what we're talking about.
And wouldn't we have to agree on how we're going to misspell it so we're aware of what we're talking about?
Absolutely.
Which would make that two people engaging in a
conspiracy against discovery by their bosses, the American people, as to what exactly they're talking about. That's how deep that rabbit hole goes.